Deep underwater, where no light penetrates and silence should reign, there's a paradox. Inside a submarine, the noise never stops. You are sealed inside a floating metal cylinder hundreds of feet beneath the surface with no windows, no fresh air, no sunlight, and no internet for months on end. For 90 days, or perhaps more, the surface forgets you. This isn't a prison, it is duty. However, the biggest threat is not torpedoes or depth pressure, but the psychological and physical weight of isolation. The question is not how submariners physically endure, but how they survive mentally. Submariners cope with psychological endurance through 6 key strategies. One of the primary strategies is a strict routine and structure. Submariners use routine as an anchor when time becomes distorted due to a lack of natural light. Everything is planned, from waking and eating to exercising and standing watch. Sailors operate on an 18-hour cycle, rotating between 6 hours on duty and 12 hours off. This rigid structure helps to maintain sleep patterns, combat disorientation, and reduce anxiety. Psychologists refer to this as temporal orientation, but submariners call it survival. Another crucial strategy is finding privacy and personal time in a confined space. Even in a space the size of a small apartment with 130 people, sailors carve out mental sanctuaries. They use earbuds, read books, watch downloaded films, or journal to protect their individuality and provide emotional relief. Some practice yoga or learn new languages. This private time is not a luxury. It is a form of medicine that helps stress levels drop and frustrations dissolve. Physical exercise is considered psychological armor. It's not an option, but a necessary part of coping with life on a submarine. Even though you cannot run, every submarine has a small gym. Physical activity helps to combat anxiety and depression by boosting endorphins and flushing cortisol. It also helps to prevent physical degradation in a static environment. Submariners get creative with their cardio, using burpees, resistance bands, and dumbbell presses in cramped quarters. According to studies, submariners who exercise regularly report significantly lower levels of depression and irritability. Mindfulness is another powerful tool. It's not the trendy, app-based version, but the raw, psychological discipline of being present. Dispositional mindfulness, which involves moment-to-moment awareness and acceptance, is linked to better mood regulation, lower stress, and higher emotional resilience in isolated environments. A 2021 study found that submariners who practiced mindfulness-based strategies experience fewer negative emotional states, even on long-duration missions. When boredom or panic sets in, they return to their breath or observe the feeling without judgment.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
They accept confinement instead of fighting it, and in that surrender, they gain strength. Social cohesion and communication are also vital. The crew becomes a family, and camaraderie is intentionally built through shared meals, humor, and rituals like weekly movie nights. Conflicts are managed ruthlessly to prevent them from breaking the crew, and open communication is essential. Officers monitor morale, and peer support is critical, with everyone watching out for one another. A Royal Navy captain noted in a BBC interview that knowing your crewmates like brothers was the most important factor in preventing breakdowns. Finally, a sense of purpose and future planning provides fuel for submariners. Submarine life is difficult, and sailors miss significant life events. The best sailors focus on the why: national defense, a child's college fund, or planning a future vacation. This focus on the future gives meaning to the present. They track days not just as a countdown, but as a measure of progress toward their goals. This upward psychological motion keeps their spirits afloat even while submerged. The stakes of failing to adapt are not theoretical, they are immediate. A mentally unstable crew member is a threat to the entire vessel, and there is no evacuation. This is why these coping strategies are drilled, not suggested, and psychological screenings and resilience tests are standard. The physical toll of submarine life is significant and reaches far beyond simple inconvenience. The air inside a submarine is recycled and chemically scrubbed, and prolonged exposure can lead to new-onset asthma and other respiratory symptoms like chronic cough, wheezing, and nasal irritation. A 2022 abstract confirmed that submariners experience elevated respiratory symptoms after long deployments. Submarine air lacks the microbial diversity of open air and can become an irritant over time. The heart and cardiovascular system also adapt in potentially dangerous ways. A large study in occupational medicine found a measurable increase in ischemic heart disease among career submariners, linking longer time on subs to a higher risk of heart attacks. This is attributed to limited physical activity, elevated stress hormones, and vitamin D deficiencies from a lack of natural light. Regarding radiation, nuclear submarines are heavily shielded, and radiation exposure is continuously monitored and kept at levels comparable to normal background levels. A 2022 review of long-term radiation exposure found no statistically significant increase in cancer mortality among nuclear submariners. However, ionizing radiation has a cumulative effect, and even low doses over many years can incrementally raise the lifetime cancer risk, especially for those in specific roles like engineering watchstanders. The risk is minimized and managed, but it is never zero. The psychological and physiological effects of living in a confined, dark environment are also profound. Without natural light, the body's internal clock or circadian rhythm drifts and melatonin production becomes erratic. A Lancet study highlighted that submariners suffer from chronic fatigue, cognitive impairment, and decreased mental performance due to disrupted sleep. These disturbances can lead to lingering insomnia and anxiety even after leaving the service. The psychological strain can also manifest as irritability, detachment, and depressive episodes. The human body is wired for rhythm, light, and space, and when these are removed, the mind falters. Emergency scenarios, although rare, also pose a significant threat. Fires, equipment failures, and other accidents can turn a confined space into a disaster zone. The psychological toll of these events, even simulated ones, is immense, spiking cortisol levels and impairing decision-making. The real thing leaves scars, both physical from smoke and chemical inhalation, and psychological from the trauma. The constant awareness of what could go wrong creates a baseline stress that never fully disappears. Subtle yet real erosions also occur. The dry, filtered air causes skin irritation and eye problems, and vision changes have been reported due to a lack of distance vision stimuli. The body's microbiome, the ecosystem of bacteria on the skin and in the gut, also suffers from a lack of microbial diversity, which can lead to gastrointestinal issues, skin imbalances, and altered immune responses. Some research suggests this can make them more vulnerable to illness after deployment when they are reintroduced to the outside world's microbial diversity.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
Naval medical teams monitor submariners closely because the body keeps score. Not everything is reversible. New-onset asthma or circadian damage may take months to rebalance, and stress accumulates silently. These are the costs of global reach and silent deterrence, paid with lungs, sleep, and silence. Despite the deep ocean being a place of natural silence, inside a submarine, the noise is constant. The vessel itself is a cacophony of humming machinery, vibrating engines, and whirring ventilation systems. This unrelenting noise is a threat to hearing, sleep, and sanity. Noise-induced hearing loss, NIHL, is a documented and measurable consequence of prolonged exposure to these high-decibel environments. The 3.8 kHz frequency range, essential for interpreting speech, is the most vulnerable, and many personnel lose significant sensitivity in this range over time. The typical decibel levels in machinery spaces, which can hover between 90 and 115 dB, are higher than a busy freeway, and prolonged exposure above 85 dB can cause permanent hearing damage. The Navy provides hearing protection, but in many compartments, wearing earplugs is considered dangerous because it muffles not only harmful sounds, but also vital alarms and commands. Most sailors choose alertness over hearing protection, and their ears pay the price. The constant noise also ruins sleep, which is a critical factor for maintaining operational readiness. Acoustic studies state that noise levels in sleeping quarters should not exceed 75-80 dB for quality rest, but on many submarines, levels can spike above 85 dB. This constant noise prevents the brain from detaching and resting fully. Lack of quality sleep impairs reaction time, memory, emotional regulation, and judgment. In a high-stakes environment, these deficits can become lethal. Studies reinforce that sailors exposed to prolonged machinery noise report lower sleep satisfaction, increased fatigue, and higher rates of stress. This chronic sleep disruption wears down the body and brain invisibly until they can no longer recover between shifts. Former submariners have spoken about the cumulative damage, with some reporting severe tinnitus that keeps them awake years after they have left the service. Others describe a cruel irony, needing background noise to fall asleep because they can no longer tolerate silence. The noise rewires the brain, and its absence becomes unbearable. Modern submarine designs incorporate acoustic dampening and vibration isolation systems to mitigate this. But retrofitting older vessels is a challenge. In many cases, noise remains a built-in hazard, and those assigned to noisier areas suffer most. Crews use makeshift sound barriers and personal white noise devices to cope, but these are only minor fixes. The solution must be structural, with naval engineering prioritizing acoustic habitability as a survival factor. The silent service pays for its stealth with the health of its crew. Before a candidate ever boards a nuclear submarine, they must pass a psychological examination called Subscreen. This is a 240-item test designed to detect who can endure the pressure of life in a submerged war machine. It screens for emotional stability, anxiety, motivation, claustrophobic tendencies, and depression risk. A psychological failure is not a private problem. It is a threat to the entire mission. The screening system was developed after early Cold War submariners experienced panic attacks, psychotic breaks, and suicides, which endangered the entire crew. The Navy learned that it needed to screen for psychological durability, not just technical skill. Subscreen measures stability, asking if a candidate can remain functional in sensory deprivation for months without unraveling. It asks questions about emotional reactivity, social tolerance, and suicidal thoughts, with patterns being more important than individual answers. The data is reviewed by trained Navy psychologists who look for nuance and contradictions. If concerns are flagged, candidates undergo a deeper, face-to-face interview. The interviewers look for resilience, emotional maturity, and the right motivation. They want people who are drawn to the unique challenge of submarine life, not those seeking a quick escape or adventure. Claustrophobia is a hard stop. The confined spaces of a submarine can break those who need space to think and breathe. While psychiatric conditions don't mean automatic rejection, a history of untreated depression, current symptoms, or instability under stress results in swift disqualification. There is no exit once a submarine is deployed, and a candidate who is not psychologically suited for the relentless environment will be the first to crack. The screening doesn't end with the initial test. It is a continuous evaluation. Performance is monitored, peer reports are taken seriously, and behavioral changes are tracked. This is preventative, not punitive, as the Navy knows the cost of denial. Today's submarine force is proactive, with mental health professionals embedded in selection and commanding officers trained to recognize early warning signs. Generational changes have led to the evolution of Subscreen to account for baseline digital dependency and shifts in emotional expression. Gender inclusion has also required smarter screening standards, as emotional resilience can look different across individuals. The payoff is fewer breakdowns, fewer disciplinary incidents, higher retention, and most importantly, safer submarines. Psychological screening is not elitism. It is risk management. The stakes of failure are irreversible. One panic attack or one outburst in the wrong place can threaten the entire crew. This is why the system exists, to protect lives by ensuring that only the mentally elastic are trusted in the dark. When illness or injury strikes on a nuclear submarine, there is no hospital, no ambulance, and no emergency room. Help is days away, and surfacing is a dangerous, mission-jeopardizing risk. Therefore, any medical problem must be handled from inside the vessel. Every submarine has at least one highly trained independent duty corpsman or medical officer. This person is a hybrid of a nurse, surgeon, pharmacist, and diagnostician, trained in emergency surgery, trauma care, and improvisation. All crew members also receive training in emergency protocols. The submarine's medical bay is a small room, but it holds life-saving equipment like defibrillators, handheld ultrasound devices, and hundreds of medications. There is no room for doubt or clutter. If supplies run out or a tool breaks, the crew must improvise, as resupply is not an option. In critical situations, submariners can use secure, encrypted communications to contact medical experts on shore for guidance. They can receive step-by-step instructions from specialists, which can mean the difference between stabilization and catastrophe. Evacuation is a last resort, requiring the submarine to surface and risk detection. These decisions weigh heavily on the captain. Prevention is not a suggestion, but a doctrine. Sailors are screened for medical histories before deployment, and pre-existing conditions are flagged. Hygiene is strictly enforced, and even dental health is scrutinized to prevent infections. The crew is also trained to monitor mental health, as confined environments can breed anxiety and depression. Commanding officers are briefed on behavioral red flags, and peer intervention is standard. Telepsychiatry is used when necessary, and recreational activities are encouraged as a form of therapy. This is because the submarine cannot afford breakdowns. Incidents like a sailor with appendicitis needing evacuation highlight that while systems are not perfect, risks can be delayed and mitigated. Every Navy with nuclear submarines follows medical response doctrines set by international bodies, with policies for everything from radiation triage to cross-support between nations. Submarine medicine is a life philosophy, emphasizing preparedness, training, and calmness in a world where every second is the difference between life and death. Discipline on a nuclear submarine is about survival, not just military formality. The smallest lapse in behavior can spiral into chaos. The first rule is an unshakable hierarchy, where rank defines everything. In a crisis, orders must be followed immediately and without debate, and crew members are conditioned to react with automatic precision. There is zero tolerance for conflict, as personal drama is considered poison in such a confined space. The culture is built on emotional restraint and professionalism, with grievances addressed quietly through the chain of command. A sailor who becomes volatile is a liability to morale and safety, and their ego must be checked at the hatch. Politics and religion are banned in practice to prevent division. The crew's loyalty shifts from abstract ideologies to the mission and the team. It is not censorship, but cohesion. Safety protocols are followed to the letter because every piece of equipment is dangerous. Checklists are gospel, and a culture of double-checking and triple-confirming is paramount to prevent mistakes that could lead to catastrophe. Recklessness is called out immediately. Hygiene and cleanliness are also enforced with military precision, as one careless sailor can degrade air quality or spread disease. Noise and light discipline are critical for maintaining the crew's mental and physical health. There are strict rules around rest, including the use of red lights in sleeping areas to preserve circadian rhythms. Loud voices, door slamming, and even laughter are kept to a whisper. Fatigue can cause mistakes, and if a shipmate is robbed of sleep, the mission is robbed of a sharp mind and steady hands. Silence is a survival tactic. Controlled communication is also enforced, with messages to families censored for operational security and no internet access. Revealing location or mission details can put the boat at risk. Constant drills for fires, floods, and other emergencies are run weekly to ensure that every person knows exactly how to react until it becomes a reflex. There is no time to consult a manual in an emergency. Discipline is reinforced with camaraderie, peer accountability, and rituals. The crew becomes a family, and shared struggle builds resilience. If discipline fails, the consequences are swift, with a sailor being relieved of duty, confined, or evacuated. Trust is fragile, and one broken link can break the entire chain. Leadership on a submarine is about calm authority and competence under crushing pressure, not intimidation. The silent service survives not because of advanced technology, but because of human discipline. This discipline is not oppression. It is liberation from chaos and disaster. The psychological load of life aboard a nuclear submarine is brutal, and intentionally so. Crew members inhabit a few hundred square feet, a physical and emotional compression where every secret is a luxury no one can afford. They sleep in hot racks, a relentless rotation that leaves no space truly private. Over a 3-month patrol, depression, anger, and resentment have nowhere to hide. They are exposed as liabilities to be managed. This environment, where arguments erupt over trivialities like misplaced socks, is an emotional minefield. Yet submarines maintain some of the most disciplined and conflict-free environments in the military. This is not the suppression of tension, but its absolute mastery. Their enemy is an environment of their own creation, a crucible forged to eliminate the weak. The absence of sunlight is a deliberate feature, a constant reminder that human biology is no match for their strategic purpose. Without the golden hour or the slow sweep of shadows, the body's circadian rhythm breaks and the crew's internal clocks fall out of sync. This biological disarmament is the default state for a submariner. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain's master clock, drifts, negatively impacting sleep, mood, and cognition. Their sophisticated bodies, tuned to detect the known rhythms of the sun, are deaf to the inevitable. They fire first, in a way, by choosing to operate on an 18-hour watch rotation, a biologically unnatural schedule that extracts a slow, invisible biological cost. The submarine's artificial lighting is a weapon, providing less than 200 lux, a dim counterfeit of the sun. It constantly sends the wrong message to the circadian system, telling the brain it is night, even when it is noon. Melatonin is not suppressed, cortisol does not peak correctly, and the entire system is deliberately desynchronized. This condition, called circadian misalignment, is the invisible war submariners fight. A Department of Defense study found that sailors on the 18-hour schedule reported significantly worse sleep quality and a phase delay in their melatonin levels. Their bodies believed it was night hours after it actually was. This is not a weakness, but a tool. This delay ruined sleep, clouded judgment, and slowed reaction times, but the training ensures the mind remains sharp despite the body's failure. Mental clarity is not optional underwater. It is the currency of survival. The 18-hour rotation persists because it works operationally, creating a predictable rhythm of duty cycles and maximizing coverage. Its biological cost is a known quantity, a price paid for tactical advantage. What took their bodies years to build takes seconds to dismantle. Yet they rise to the challenge. The crews are experimenting with 24-hour rotations and mitigation strategies like higher lux levels during the day and dimmer red lighting at night. Blackout curtains and strict sleep hygiene protocols are temporary solutions, mere bandages for a self-inflicted wound that is an unavoidable consequence of underwater service. Repeated circadian disruption has been linked to an increased risk of depression, anxiety, and cardiovascular issues. Hormonal cycles are thrown off, and relationships suffer as sailors become emotionally distant. Almost 30% of crew members report moderate to severe mood disturbances by the halfway point of a long deployment. The mountain, once their shield, became a monument to their miscalculation. Sleep is often the first casualty. Fragmented rest of 3 to 5 hours at a time, interrupted by alarms or temperature changes. The tight bunks and constant noise contribute to these difficulties. Some sailors report vivid nightmares or sleepwalking, while others experience a mental blurring where days blend together. Without the sun to mark the passage of time, missions can feel endless. Chronobiologists call this desynchrinosis, a condition also experienced by astronauts. The body tries to keep time, but the environment refuses to cooperate. The irony is that submarines are meticulously controlled environments, but light, the most basic environmental cue for human health, is an afterthought. The resulting circadian damage continues to take a toll on the crew, but that is the cost of victory. Sustained circadian misalignment leads to lower vigilance, which in military terms means lower readiness. One lapse of attention in sonar, a mistake during a reactor drill, or a misread in fire control can lead to mission failure and loss of life. The human cost is significant, as sailors return home not only sleep-deprived, but also fundamentally changed. Many report persistent insomnia, mood swings, and difficulty reintegrating with normal time. Their internal and external clocks can take weeks or months to restabilize, as prolonged circadian disruption can rewire a person in ways that are not always reversible. The absence of sunlight is not merely a logistical challenge. It is a psychological and physiological hazard that threatens performance. But they have built a system to master it. It takes away the body's guide to time, mood, alertness, and resilience. But the will of the crew takes its place. On a nuclear submarine, there is no escape, no doors to slam, and no windows to look out of. It is a pressurized, claustrophobic microcosm where 150 men and women are sealed in steel, submerged for months. Every breath and every action is shared. In this environment, conflict is not just unpleasant, it is existentially dangerous. A conflict is handled quietly, quickly, and without public spectacle because drama is a threat multiplier. Letting resentment fester in public contaminates morale. The most seasoned crew members might pull a sailor aside for a quiet word, a course correction, or a reset. The goal is always to de-escalate without poisoning the group. The psychological load of submarine life is so intense that even minor annoyances can escalate into unspoken wars. The constant proximity wears on people, and the lack of personal space triggers irritability and passive aggression. Their confidence, built on layers of reinforced concrete, was a flimsy curtain before the storm. Submarine culture relies on strict discipline and enforced boundaries to maintain peace. Rules are rigid, and there is a clear hierarchy for behavior, not just operations. This is because, on a submarine, controversy is the enemy of cohesion. Certain topics, such as politics, religion, and social ideology, are off-limits by unspoken agreement. This is not censorship, but a necessity, as the stakes are too high for debates that can spiral out of control. Instead, crews bond over shared experiences like drills, inside jokes, and late-night card games. Submariners develop an almost supernatural sensitivity to each other's moods and micro-expressions, not because they are trained psychologists, but because they have to be. This hyper-awareness is a form of protective empathy, a way to spot tensions before they escalate and to offer support at the right time. They can tell who is sleep-deprived by how they chew, or who is on edge by the volume of their breathing. This emotional intelligence becomes a reflex. The most successful crew members are those with low neuroticism, high emotional intelligence, and strong impulse control. They are emotionally stable, and when tension builds, they recalibrate, step back, and diffuse the situation. A sailor's ability to adapt to submarine life is not a matter of strength, but of psychological adaptation. Some sailors thrive, while others mentally collapse, and the difference is not always obvious. The real challenge is mental, and some sailors, even elite ones, simply cannot adapt. The first thing that breaks is always sleep, as the 18-hour cycle defies the natural circadian rhythm and leads to insomnia, daytime drowsiness, and mood volatility. Sailors who fail to adjust show markedly reduced executive function and increased fatigue within 10 days of submergence. The ones who remain sharp build structured internal discipline through micro-routines, such as wake-up rituals and mindful breaks. They treat sleep as sacred time, using blackout masks and earplugs. As one veteran submariner psychologist noted, those who manage their rhythm manage their mission. Another dividing line is purpose and a sense of meaning. Submariners who believe in the mission and understand their strategic role hold on longer, as this sense of meaning acts as a shield against despair. Conversely, those who fixate on external stresses like family or home issues often drift into mental fatigue, feeling cut off and irrelevant. Dr. Cheryl Masson, a clinical researcher, wrote, "When the mind understands why, the body can withstand almost any how." For some crew members, being underwater and detached from the noise of civilian life is liberating. They report mental clarity, improved mood, and stronger peer bonds. Studies confirm that individuals with introverted tendencies often outperform expectations in isolated environments. They don't just adapt, they thrive. Physical fitness is another anchor for adaptation. Regular workouts regulate circadian rhythms, release endorphins, and create small daily goals. In contrast, those who abandon physical health tend to experience lethargy, depression, and decreased cognitive sharpness. Fit crews boost morale and set a positive tone. When sailors fail to adapt, symptoms can escalate quickly, including sudden outbursts, insomnia, anxiety attacks, and paranoia. This places a heavy burden on the entire crew. Submarine recruitment screens for emotional control, social cooperation, and psychological flexibility. But true adaptation cannot be fully predicted. It must be earned through habits, connection, and discipline. The ones who survive mentally are those who can live without the sun, noise, and space, and still show up every day, alert and steady. This is not an innate trait. It is a skill that is built under pressure, underwater, in the dark. Conflict doesn't just come from arguments, it comes from stress with nowhere to go. To combat this, submarines are filled with structured coping outlets like recreation rooms with games and movies, communal events, and fitness challenges. These aren't just distractions, they are pressure valves that give the crew a safe space to vent and laugh. Submariners understand that a bored mind festers, while a busy mind adapts. Even small forms of entertainment, such as a communal crossword or a fantasy football league, become a lifeline. They give the crew something to look forward to that isn't duty or drills. The weight of constant responsibility is another morale breaker. Every crew member is directly or indirectly responsible for a chain of systems that cannot fail. There is no room for sloppiness and no mental day off. This constant state of hypervigilance erodes patience and resilience. Leadership combats this with purpose framing, explaining even mundane jobs as critical contributions to national security and deterrence. This framing provides weight and identity to the work. When morale fails, it doesn't scream, it withers. Sailors become quiet, tasks get sloppy, and depression spreads. The crew turns into a cold, joyless, brittle machine. In one incident, a U.S. Navy humanitarian mission was almost derailed due to low morale compounded by a man overboard incident, with investigations citing crew fatigue, miscommunication, and psychological stress as contributing factors. This shows that morale is not a soft factor. It is the psychological armor of every submarine deployment. Life inside a submarine presents unique challenges to morale. There's the isolation trap, where submariners vanish from the world for 3 to 6 months at a time without phone signal or internet. Extended tours have been shown to increase mental fatigue and emotional blunting, especially around the 10-week mark. The inability to respond to family emergencies or even hear about them is a heavy weight that lingers. Command addresses this with deliberate distractions like movie nights and trivia games. But these are merely bandages for a wound that is part of the job. Another significant morale killer is the food repetition spiral. After the first week, fresh food runs out and the crew is left with repetitive meals, which is emotionally corrosive. The loss of food variety can be the fastest way to kill morale on board. And psychologically, without flavor variation, even full meals stop being satisfying. Command combats this by rationing treats and scheduling morale menus, making them a tool for survival. Leadership sets the emotional temperature on a submarine. Officers don't just lead drills, they set an emotional precedent. If a leader is cold, the crew mirrors that energy. But when leaders embody calm authority and fair conflict resolution, the crew adapts and holds each other accountable. This peer accountability is the glue that holds the culture together. When you live under pressure, you forge bonds that are tighter and more like a family than colleagues. These shared memories act as a collective armor against future conflict. On a submarine, there is a clear hierarchy of military ranks, but there is also an unofficial rank of social capital. A sailor who keeps morale up and diffuses tension holds emotional authority and acts as a quiet leader or a conflict buffer. The culture of calm, respect, and discretion starts at the top and is reinforced by peer accountability. Submariners know that they are being observed constantly, which leads to self-regulated behavior. This constant visibility refines character, making submariners more measured, thoughtful, and consistent. This constant exposure paradoxically creates a deep privacy of trust, as the crew has seen each other at their worst and accepted them. Submariners maintain peace, not because they are saints, but because the mission demands it, understanding that personal ego has no place next to uranium. They know that understanding a bad mood could be the difference between an error and an alert, so they cultivate a culture of silent respect and refined awareness. Conflict doesn't disappear on a submarine, it's still there, bubbling and pressurizing. What makes submariners different is that they have learned to manage it without noise, collapse, or drama. They have learned that in the absence of physical space, respect must expand, and in the absence of privacy, empathy must deepen. In a steel tube designed for death, shared dignity and discipline are what keep life intact. Morale is not a fragile thing by accident. It is strong by design. Every leader on board or ashore can learn from this because in the deep, it's not the steel that holds the sub together, it's the people.